From Built It Productions, it's The Great Creators. Conversations about creativity with some of the most celebrated actors, musicians, and performers of our time. I'm Guy Raz, and on the show today, hitmaker, songwriter, and producer Ryan Tedder. How he went from mixing $300 demos for other musicians to writing songs for artists like Beyoncé, Adele, and his own band, One Republic.
So it's different with everybody. You have to be a listener. You have to be empathetic. You have to make sure the artist is heard. You know, I'm a super high energy type A person, so I have to be careful that I don't steamroll whoever's in the room.
Lots of you may know Ryan Tedder as the lead singer and founding member of One Republic. The band stormed onto the international stage with their first hit single, Apologize, in 2006. Since then, One Republic has sold over 16 million records worldwide. And while that's impressive enough, Ryan's bigger success might be as a songwriter and producer for other musicians like Taylor Swift, Leona Lewis, Kelly Clarkson, Ariana Grande, Lil Nas X, and Sir Paul McCartney. Honestly, there are too many people on the list. Ryan Tedder has written or co-written massive hits, including Adele's Rumor Has It, Beyoncé's Halo, and Ellie Goulding's Burn. He's known for his ability to connect with different artists and help them find ways to bring out their best work. But interestingly, despite all of those glittering names, in this episode of The Great Creators, you'll hear why Ryan had really bad stage fright and how he conquered it, how he approaches collaboration with big-name musicians, and why, on the eve of the release of his fourth album, overtoured, overbooked, and overstressed, Ryan almost quit the music industry entirely. That's all coming up after this quick break. Hey, before we get back to the show, just a quick announcement. If you're listening in the car or on a smart speaker and you have young kids in range, just a heads up that there are a few swear words in this episode in case you want to listen later with headphones or without the kids nearby, but I definitely hope you keep listening either way. Okay, thanks so much, and on with the show. Ryan Tedder was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and raised by an extended family of Christian missionaries and pastors. Crucially, for Ryan, they were also extremely musical, starting with his own father, Gary.
My dad was a gospel songwriter. So there's that weird time in the 70s where gospel music crossed into top 40 and pop.
Yes.
My dad was writing some of those songs. He was touring and opened up for Elvis, opened up for I think Jerry Lewis. I mean, there's a bunch of artists of that time period that he was opening up for, and he was in one of those large traveling gospel troops, Living Sound, World Action Singers. And so, yeah, I kind of came up with a grand piano in my house and knowing that my dad was obsessed with music.
You were learning piano from age 3, right? Like you were doing
Correct.
The Suzuki method from a young age.
Yeah, very young. Yeah. I just was always picking around. I mean, the first song that I remember learning on piano was Axel F. The theme of
Yep.
And when my parents kind of realized, at this point, I think my parents were divorced, but my mom heard me pecking out that melody, and she was like, "Who taught you that?" And I was like, "Nobody." You know, I heard it on the radio, and then Chariots of Fire and all the 80s stuff.
Yeah.
I just called to say I love you. Yeah. And so I did Suzuki, and then I did classical piano, forced classical piano until age 12, 13, and then at that point started just teaching myself and learning songs that I heard on the radio, and then that's what led me accidentally into songwriting.
It sounds like that was your family. Like your dad was a musician. You were,
my uncle was too. My cousins who I lived with, one of whom is now touring in One Republic. There was 11 kids. They all play instruments. They were called the Clark family, and their dad's a tent revival pastor. Yeah. And I was always surrounded by music. I would say that I was preternaturally obsessed, though. It was an obsession with me. There was like, you're good at music, you're good at piano. I was like, no. obsessed with music. I'm obsessed with the songs on the radio. Like, who's writing these? How are they written? And at 13, 14 is, I think, when my dad told me, I was talking about one particular song on the radio. It might have been, like, honestly, Blame It on the Rain, Milli Vanilli or something. It was like that early 90s.
Great song, by the way.
Great song. Great song.
A great song.
Even though they didn't sing it.
Beautiful
it's a
song.
great song.
Yeah.
And he told me, look into Diane Warren. I think she wrote that. And I was like, what? You mean Milli Vanilli didn't write it? Not only did they not sing it, they didn't write it. And that one comment got my head spinning. And I assumed that because the artists that I loved growing up, that I would buy albums from, Michael Jackson, Peter Gabriel. I was obsessed with Peter Gabriel. And, of course, he writes everything, right? The Beatles write everything.
Yeah.
The Beach Boys wrote everything. So I never stopped to think that 50% at any given point, like especially in the 1980s and 90s, up to like 50% of the songs you're listening to were not written by the artists that were singing them. And that blew my mind.
It was interesting because even though you grew up in this sort of Christian milieu and mostly in Tulsa and then later in Colorado Springs, you were not restricted. Like your parents didn't say you can only listen to Christian music. You listen to lots of things.
Well, like the Eureka moment, I was 11 years old and I kept begging for a stereo system for Christmas. I finally got it. And this is back when you would open the Sears catalog and show your parents, like, this is what I want. This is 1991, I think, or 2. And I got my stereo. The moment I got that stereo, the CCM world kind of went to the wayside, and I started making mixtapes from Top 40 radio. And Top 40 became my gospel. Yeah. And that was what got me. This is the year that, MC Hammer blew up, Boyz II Men, Sting. I was obsessed with the early 90s, and then of course Nirvana, so on and so forth. Yeah, so radio, Top 40 was my gateway drug to the addiction that I have now.
And British music, you were into Oasis and Blur and like that whole British.
That's why I'm in a band. The reason I started One Republic was because of Oasis, because of Blur, because of those bands, U2, the UK-centric artists I just thought had more swag and were so cool. Yeah. And the solo artists cut to when I was late teens, early 20s, just a kid on an acoustic guitar. I looked around the landscape and I was like, all right, Justin Timberlake already exists. I'm never going to be more popular than him. I'm never going to dance better than him. John Mayer already exists, and the guy can outplay me 10 ways to Sunday, so that's never going to happen. And then you had 3 or 4 other pop-up, like Ryan Cabrera, Howie Day. You had a lot of these solo, boy next door, acoustic guitar guys. And I was already like kind of getting very scared of the notion of being a solo artist.
When you were this is like, you're in your teenage years, and I read that when you were in high school, like you were performing, you were in theater, like you were
acting.
Out there, you were acting, you were on stage. So you were, and were you singing like in high school? Were you performing for students?
Yeah, my coming out in terms of performance, I had horrific stage fright.
In front of other kids?
In front of other kids, yeah. And also, and I don't mean this whatsoever to besmirch church choirs.
Yeah.
Or the church whatsoever, but I was like drilled into me growing up in youth group, in church, and in choir is humility, be humble. Yeah. It's not about you, it's about God. It's not about you, it's about everybody else. And that was such a mantra in my head that the idea of like sticking my head above the crowd and being like, I can sing, like that terrified me.
Yeah.
And I'm 14 years old at this point. We have this phenomenal drama program by my Dixie Jordan, who's now passed, but who was my drama teacher. She's everybody has 1 or 2 people in my line of work, in the entertainment industry, that had they not said what they said when they said it in your life, you would not have done what you did. And you would not have gone on to be who you are. Dixie Jordan was my first person. Day 1 of my theater program in 14, we did an improv class, and she went around the circle of 10 kids, 14 kids, and threw lines at you, and however you responded instantly, and then she'd keep it going for as long as you could. And she got to me, and I have a very deadpan sense of humor. I'm zinging stuff back at her. The whole class is dying with laughter. And we kept it going for 5 minutes. The end of class, she says, Ryan, I need you to stay after. This freshman year, first day. Everyone leaves the class. She takes her glasses off. She says, Ryan, I've been doing this for 25 years. About every 5 years, I spot a student, and it almost always happens like first day of class. And she said, you are that kid. This is the day. I'm telling you right now, based on what you just did.
Wow.
If you want to go into acting or theater, entertainment as a profession, you 100% have the DNA to do it. Wow. So then the first show that comes up is, I think it was Oklahoma, and I had to sing in front of everyone. I had to audition in front of everybody. They have a piano player there. We're going through all the songs. It comes to me. I'm nervous as hell because I know that I can outsing anybody in that class like light years, because I had been quietly singing, and this is like in my closet, physically in my closet, up in my room, because everything had carpet in the 90s. So it was like dead as a doorknob, and I could sing, and I'd go in there for an hour to 2 hours singing whatever the hit songs are that were out at the time. I was singing Police records and Sting and Boyz II Men. I got my falsetto from the Beach Boys.
Just listening and singing and listening and singing.
Over and over.
But there's a difference between being able to do it, but also then having to do it when you're really nervous, because it can affect your vocal cords.
Oh, it crushes your vocal cords. Nerves are the absolute performance killer, and getting over them when you're 14 or 15 is a nightmare. And you have to go through all these techniques. Muscle memory is key. Yeah. Beyoncé, lesson number 1, over-rehearse, like over-sing the song to the point where even when you freeze up, and you forget the lyrics, your body hasn't, and your body goes into auto drive. It's the strangest thing. You're nervous as hell. Your hands are sweating, like hand sweaty mom spaghetti, just like, Eminem said, but your muscle memory kicks in. And
you had to do that for that play. You had to basically perform for the first time.
In front of everybody. For the first time in front of my whole class. And I was singing, everything's up to date in Kansas City. It's gone about as far as it can go, but like in the style of Boyz II Men or something. And it was the teacher, the whole class turns and looks at me, and the teacher goes, Ryan, like, what in the world? You could do that? How long have you been able to do that? And I was like, since I was like 7. And she was like, get up here. And then she had to coach me through like taming the vibrato, not doing runs, and singing it more traditional. But yeah, that was the moment she said to me, I haven't had any male vocalist in this school since I've taught at this school that could sing as well as you can.
Wow.
And you have to go into this. That was like the second time she told me, this has to be your job.
So you knew already that this was what you wanted to do. And one of the things that you were doing as a teenager in high school, you briefly alluded to this, but like I read you were really studying songwriters like Babyface and Prince. I mean, people don't realize Prince wrote, Manic Monday. I'm just thinking about that just song off the top of my head. I think of the Bangles song. It's a beautiful song. Love
Nothing
Bazaar.
Compares to You.
Nothing Compares to You. I mean, you can go on and on.
Yeah.
You were studying these writers. You were writing songs, trying to decode how they were writing songs. What do you remember doing at that time in your life to figure that out?
I remember my specific approach was, this is how I learned my life hack. See, life before YouTube just showed you everything. I would take a song by Babyface, let's say End of the Road, right? Mm-hmm. I remember learning the chords and writing a completely different song, but over those chords. Because the one thing that I figured out pretty quickly was the same cycle of chord sequences are working universally. Like all I'd have to do is play the 4 chords or 6 chords from End of the Road, and without even singing over them, the chords felt like top 40.
Yeah.
So I absorbed so much. I swear to God, by the time I was 16, 17, if the average person had listened to 10,000 hours of music, I had listened to 30 or 40,000. It was to the point where my mom would say, no headphones at the dinner table.
Yeah.
I had baked in the sound of quote unquote hit songs into my brain ad nauseum. So when I finally sat down and said, I wonder if I can do that. Almost the first song that came out of me sounded kind of like a hit.
I mean, you grew up in this like culture of don't stick your head out, God is the star, and
Yes.
you're sort of fighting against that, but you're also writing these songs, and were you hiding them from people? Were you doing it secretly?
My fear of fear of failure, fear of being made fun of, fear of not being good was so high. My promise to myself was, I'm going to workshop the songwriting aspect of it for as long as it takes. So the first time I step on stage and ever open my mouth in front of actual people, the songs will be so good that it'll be undeniable. And so for me, it was, let's understand the architecture of how that house is built, of how you build hits, so I can actually have a sustained career. And that was my thinking at like 14. I was like, I don't want to make a fool of myself in front of my peers with bad songs. It was really that simple.
I think you were 20 or 21, and you got a chance to go on an MTV show for Total Request Live, and it was a competition where they brought on unknown singers. And what's amazing, you can watch this. Anybody listening can go watch this on YouTube. It's well worth watching because it's an amazing performance. I mean, you're so young, and it's a great song. And most of the time, those contestants will go on, and we'll never hear from them again. I mean, that's what happens 99% of the time. But of course, here you are today. At 21, because you're about to graduate from college, I know you studied like marketing and public relations. You went to Oral Roberts University, but really you were determined. You knew you wanted a career in music. But at that point, did you think that your career was going to be Ryan Tedder, singer, frontman, or Ryan Tedder, songwriter for other people? Because I think that was where your head might have been at that time.
I would not call myself a commanding frontman star at age 21. I wasn't. I could outright all the other frontmen that were my same age at the time, but they could outperform me, right? Because again, chicken or the egg, I chose whatever. I chose songwriting in lieu of performing. Really, I should have been doing both at the same time. As Dave Grohl says, get out there and dare to suck in front of everybody. I didn't have the balls. I didn't have the balls to suck in front of people. So at 21, I was interning at DreamWorks Publishing that summer, and they offered me a publishing deal.
Basically a deal to write songs for their artists.
For hire, professional.
And that was what Charlie Puth was doing. That was his first job.
Correct.
Yeah.
If I'm being completely honest, I would say that at 20 or 21, the notion of being a full-time professional songwriter without having to overcome my fear and put myself out there was way more appealing to me than being an artist, because I knew songwriters in Nashville that made, I don't know, they didn't make a lot of money, but they made enough to have a nice house and have a nice life and not feel any stress whatsoever. That appealed to me, but that was because of fear. That for me, it was like, I know I should be out there singing. I know I should be in front of people performing. That scares the hell out of me. So I'm just going to pick the safer option, which is songwriting. So when I landed on that television show, I was so shook. I was so nervous. I stood backstage shaking and like I hated the experience. I did not enjoy all that attention. It drove me crazy. And then I went back to my college dorm room, and it was really weird for a year.
And that also led to the super producer, certainly one of the biggest producers at the time, Timbaland, who saw that performance, and you ended up you ended up working with him for a couple of years. Tell me a little bit about that period. I think it's like 2002 to 2004. You've graduated college.
Correct.
You are basically learning from one of the greatest producers at the time, and you're also writing music, writing songs and composing music. Tell me about what you remember about just learning how to compose something that would become sticky.
It's so funny that you bring this up now. I was texting yesterday with Missy Elliott because we're finishing a song that she's featuring on with an artist that I'm producing. I've been talking with her for a week, and I told her, I said, hey, I don't know if you remember me, but I was that skinny little white kid sitting in the corner when you did Under Construction, that album, like, it's Santa, but put your thing down, flip it and reverse it, like, and Ludacris, Gossip Folks, all that stuff. I was there when it was being made. I was there the day that Tim and Justin did Cry Me a River. I was there when he finished the last track on Justified.
Wow.
I was sitting there watching all of these songs being written and watching Tim make the tracks in real time. I got the single greatest masterclass of all time for 2 years with Timbaland, watching him make these records. And what I learned was, well, first of all, he doesn't use quantization. He uses his own internal like tempo to make those beats. That's why they swing the way they do and feel the way they do. Half the stuff he was doing, he was beatboxing half the beat using his mouth. That's part of what makes the sound. If you strip out his beatbox in Cry Me a River, the beat is super small. It's all of his beatboxing that makes those records so thick. And he knew instantaneously if a melody was right, if the lyric was right, if it was a hit or not. So you can't help but just glean all that. So I started producing hip hop records in 2002. I started getting paid to do it in 2002. I was selling beats to Koch Records in Atlanta, $5,000 a pop, just flipping beats as much as I could, doing demos in Nashville for $400 or $500, anything I could to turn a nickel. And when my deal ended with Tim is when I finally decided, and we're in 2004 now. It's time to leave Nashville. It's time to move to LA. I want to be in a band.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, how Ryan Tedder started that band, One Republic, and how an exchange of letters with a former girlfriend became the inspiration for one of his biggest hits. Stay with us. I'm Guy Raz, and you're listening to The Great Creators. Hey, welcome back to The Great Creators. I'm Guy Raz. So it's 2004, and a young Ryan Tedder decides to move from Nashville to Los Angeles. And while he's already producing music for other artists, what Ryan really wants to do is write and perform his own music. So he recruits his friend, guitarist Zach Filkins, and they form One Republic.
I chose a band name with my guitar player, Zach, and the first song that I wrote after 2 years of trying to figure out what my sound was. Because imagine you listen to a bunch of Britpop, and this is where Apologize comes from. This is actually important because the sound of Apologize exists because of these two diverging pathways. You come up, you're obsessed with Britpop and Brit rock from 1995 to 2002, but then you're being tutored by Timbaland, who's all hip hop with pop melodies from 2002 to 2004. So I sit down on the piano, and that's where the two worlds met, and that is Apologize. And I was like, well, I guess that's the sound of Republic.
Let's talk about that song for a minute.
Yeah.
How do you begin a song like that? Do you start with an idea? Do you start with an idea in your head? Apologize, too late. It's a concept in your head that does it begin with a word? Does it begin with
So that song, that day, I sat down at the piano. It's my dad's piano in Colorado, as I recall, and put my hands down, and literally the first thing out was the opening notes. Dun 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 dun. The basic 4-chord progression. I was like in my mind going, I want to do something that sounds cool and like kind of moody Britpop, right? That's where my head was going. So I just played those chords without thinking. I didn't even know what chords they were.
What are you listening for?
I'm listening for a mood. I'm chasing, what is the mood that I want? What is the mood that I want to create? Because music comes before, anything. It's the bed for everything, right?
Yeah.
So what is the mood that I want to feel from this song? Let me set the mood. It's the lighting, right? And then everything else you put in the room is lyrics, melody, concept. But the mood lighting is everything. Yeah. And so think about a Calvin Harris song, We Found Love. Bum, 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 bum. I'm like, even if you haven't been to Ibiza, you're there.
You are there.
And you're just like, you know what I mean? It's the mood. It sets the lighting. So Apologize, those opening chords were the lighting. I loved classical music. I grew up playing it. So in my head, I heard strings. I'm going to go symphonic. That's so different. It's unique. It's not on radio. It's something interesting. That helped create the mood. Why did I do the strings? Because nothing at radio at that time, nothing in pop music was utilizing quartets or orchestras, all to create mood. And I remember telling my guitar player, he's like, "Why the strings are such an interesting addition? Why did you put strings on this music?" And I said, "Because I want it to feel important, and strings can make something feel more important." So then the first phrase out of my mouth, and this usually doesn't happen, but it's the way it happened. I'm playing those chords, and I just went, "I'm holding on your rope, got me 10 feet off the ground." I didn't even know what it meant. I'm hearing what you say, but I just can't make a sound. I had those two lines, and I immediately was like, whoa, okay, I don't know where this is going, but wherever this is going, it sounds important. It sounds urgent. I'm holding on your rope, got me 10 feet off the ground. Immediately I'm using metaphors, right? Then I had gibberish. But wait, like, and I remember singing gibberish, and then I swear to God, the first thing out of my mouth was, "You say that it's too late to apologize, it's too late." And it was the phrase just came out.
Wow.
And immediately, and this is how I write to this day, I go, okay, who is it about? What is it about? Why am I saying, why does the phrase, "it's too late to apologize," sound so permanent over these chords? Like they were always meant to be together. Yeah. And immediately I thought, well, in my life, there's these 2 or 3 girls from high school and college that wrecked me. And I like kind of fell in love with one of my best friends. Be careful to do that in high school. It's too early to do that. She didn't want to be with me, but really did, and wanted me to wait for her until we were older so we could get married. I had that happen like 2 or 3. I basically had that happen like 3 times, and these girls would say, "You're the guy I want to marry, but I want to fool around and have fun right now and just date around." And then they would immediately go and date some jerk that would break their heart. And so I had two girls in particular who I'll never name, who wrote me letters saying, "I'm so sorry that I threw away what we had and didn't understand that you were like a good person and like that we could have been something. And I wonder, and I know that I broke your heart. Is there any shot that we could get back together? Because I think now that I've dated around and had my fun, sowed my wild oats. Yeah, right. I think now we're ready to be a couple." And I said to one of these girls in a reply letter, "It means a lot that you wrote this. I haven't thought about you in 2 or 3 years. And while I appreciate it, it's too late to apologize." And that is where the whole concept came from.
You talk about sort of this moment or, divine inspiration or whatever it is, but you also talk about a very methodical, very specific thought process, right? You talked about metaphor. You talked about visual, and it is those things like, I just can't make a sound. You tell me that you need me, then you go and cut me down. It didn't think I'd turn around and say, you're imagining this like a scene in a movie. It is a visual song. You were very specifically doing
So it has to come from a true place. So when you're writing, Bono told me at one point when we were working together, Ryan, when you've been a band as long as we have, if you have hits into your 40s, it means that you found more source material.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just selling other people's songs, which some artists do successfully. For me, source material is everything. Even though I wasn't still... All right, at 20, let me be honest. At 23, did what those 2 or 3 girls did to me still sting? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It stung. But what I did was transport myself back to how I felt.
I'm curious because you mentioned Bono, right? And you mentioned like how, and he has been with his partner since they were like 16, right? And I'll listen to his songs, and he's in his like late 50s, early 60s now. And I'm like, how is he tapping into that? Like, how is he writing these painful love songs? How is he still writing those things? Where is he going? What place is he going to? I just saw Olivia Rodrigo in concert with my kids, and she has written a brilliant record that comes from a place of real urgent experience. You know she went through every single one of those things. And sometimes I wonder, like, I think she can. She's super talented, but she's got to write another record,
Bro.
right? Tell me how you tap into those things to keep writing those emotionally resonant songs.
It is the bane of my existence, to be honest. Bono, how many ways can you write about love or the absence of it? That's Bono's thing. Like, and he approaches it from 90 million angles. And he can also write about like displaced citizens from Yemen. Like he could write a whole song about that. Bono knows that he needs source material. He's also a firm believer in God. And so there's all an underlying spiritual content to what he's writing about. It's mostly about love, right? 90% of all number one records, all hit songs are about love. Going back to Apologize, Olivia Rodrigo, I don't want to put words in her mouth.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet for her and her producer, who is wildly talented, this second album theoretically should be light years harder than the one she just put out. And let me tell you, it is brutal.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you say, right, that you rely on source material, but what about when you're writing music for other artists, like for example, Bleeding Love, right, which you wrote for Leona Lewis? Is source material still important in that case?
That came from me channeling Prince, and in every, so I say source material, right? There was no personal experience for me with Bleeding Love, the lyric. It was literally and figuratively. If Prince was sitting here right now, what lyric would he write over these chords? And I don't care what they say, I'm in love with you. They try to pull me away, but they don't know the truth. My heart's crippled by the vein that you keep on closing. You cut me open and I keep bleeding love. And that emotion I'm chasing, even if I say those lyrics, I get goosebumps. Yeah. That's what I'm chasing. You're like, what? How do you know when you've landed on something? I'm chasing goosebumps. That's the only thing I've ever chased. When it comes to dance records, it's euphoric goosebumps. When it comes to ballads, it's emotional goosebumps. And I'm borrowing, I'm an absolute succubus. So if you're in the room with me and I think that you've gone through anything painful or anything remotely disruptive in your life, I'm going to poke and prod you until you come out with it and you say it. And then I'm going to use that and I'm going to write your story with as much, I'm going to twist it and I'm going to say it in a way that like maybe the artist in the room couldn't have said it. And I'm constantly like sucking source material from every experience I go through. If I watch something on the news that bothers me, I might try to write their story. As an artist, when you've cut your teeth and sold your brand, sold your fans on the proposition that everything I've said up until now is authentic and it's something I experienced, boy, it is hard.
It's hard
to follow that up.
Right, there's no novelist who could do that. You have to imagine a world, right? I mean, it's a similar kind of approach because you have to be observational. I mean, you are basically looking at the world around you all the time, and it takes a lot of emotional energy to concentrate and take that in. I
can put an exclamation point on what you just said. As an artist, we've been signed since, OneRepublic has been signed since 2007. And we had a phenomenal run up through Native, our third album, which had Counting Stars on it. It's the one that put us into arenas, and that was my goal. Yep. And I had this feeling. We were on a flight, I think, to Israel when it dawned on me. And we were. I remember sitting on the Sea of Galilee and having this thought and saying it to someone in my band. I have no clue. Like, we've just played 22,000 tickets sold in Tel Aviv, one of our biggest hard ticket shows. We were headed to potentially to stadiums if we wanted it, and we just stayed on the train and, God willing, and the creek don't rise and all that stuff.
Yep.
And I was exhausted, and I said to my bass player, dude, I'm so terrified of this next album. And he said, why? And I said, because as of now, which like October 2015 or whatever it was, I've said everything that I want to say. As the lead singer in this band, the primary songwriter, we have to switch up our sound. We have to try something else, because anything I do now, and I knew going into 2015, 2016, that every time I'd sit down to finish a lyric, nothing Nothing. I got three or four really good songs out of like an 18-month period. And then we got to the point where our album was going to be released. And I called my manager and I said, I can't do it. I can't tour on this album. I can't promote it. I killed it. I killed it 2 weeks before it came out. I sat with the label and I said, I'm going to have a nervous breakdown if you make me promote this album. If I have to tour on this album, if I have to be gone one more month from home, I'm going to lose my mind. And frankly, half of these songs lyrically, they're not, I love the music, but I know that I'm not saying that much. So you brought up the single hardest thing of being an artist. If you write your own material, I don't care how many freaking Grammys you win in 2015 or 2021 or whatever year, like you are 12 months away or 6 months away from going, oh shit, I don't even believe myself.
Coming up, Ryan Tedder takes a break from the music scene. And the longer he stays away, the harder he finds it to get back into the studio. Stay with us. I'm Guy Raz, and you're listening to The Great Creators. Welcome back to The Great Creators. I'm Guy Raz. So it's 2016, and Ryan Tedder has helmed an internationally beloved band through 4 albums. He's written and produced music for some of the biggest stars. He's won 2 Grammys. And Ryan wanted a break. What was the reason, though? I mean, you had music that was out there that was charting. You had albums that were successful. You had songs that were still heavily played on the radio.
Yeah. Insecurity, and I would say fearful that, when we did our 4th album, Oh My My, which I love. Musically, it's the most adventurous album we've ever done. The one, Peter Gabriel and Santa Gold and Cassius and all these phenomenal features. I took myself out of the songwriting world intentionally for the first time, at the request of many of my band members and my manager. I removed myself from doing outside sessions for a year and a half. I only did One Republic, focused on one album, one thing. I wasn't listening to radio. I wasn't up in the mix. I had taken, for the first time since 2002, took my finger off the pulse. In the world that I operate, if you remove yourself for 6 months, it's problematic. It's people assume that you're out of sight, out of mind, and music changes so fast, and the trends of what's working sonically, everything changes. Structures change. Songs are 2 minutes and 20 seconds now, right? Even just that. So it was self-imposed insecurity. But when I got back to LA after not doing any real writing for a year and a half, I was already crushed mentally by my own band and my failure to even be able to promote or tour on an album. So I'm already at my all-time low. I go into sessions and I was like, whoa, music has shifted big time. Yeah. Like this is like the Chainsmokers era, right? Mm-hmm. When they were blowing up. I got into the studio and didn't trust anything I was saying. I didn't trust a note I was playing. I was like super, super trepidatious with everything. And that's why I removed myself.
So, all right. So you step away from music for a while. And I think during this time you actually did some like real estate investing and like some really non-music things. But I guess by the end of 2018, you come back. You come back to the studio. What happened? What changed?
I got to give a big tribute to a friend of mine, Andrew Watt, who's a big writer-producer. He won Producer of the Year last year or the year before, for everything from Bieber to Miley Cyrus, who we've worked on together, Sam Smith, Ozzy Osbourne. He called me out of the blue. I wasn't booking any sessions. I was like doing next to nothing. I was literally, when I say I was doing other stuff, I was not doing music. And he called me out of the blue and said, he's like, Tedder, what are you doing? I was like, I don't know. I'm working on this or that. He's like, what? He's like, dude, you got to stop with all that other stuff. And this is the way he talks. You got to stop with all that other bullshit and do what you're actually, do what you're really good at. Come over here, come to my studio. It's me, Allie, Lewis, Bell, all these huge songwriter producers, and let's work for like the next 3 to 4 days. Come do it. Well, the first day, he coaxed me into it, so I said okay, and I wrote with them and Charlie Puth what became the first single for 5 Seconds to Summer, called Easier.
Oh, wow.
And became a hit for big streaming hit for them.
Huge hit.
And then the second day we recorded a song that ended up on a One Republic album. And then the next week we did a crazy Sam Smith song with Sam Smith. And then Miley Cyrus, we did the majority of the album together. It snowballed into me going over there all the time and me realizing on the very first session, I think the magic might be back.
That year, you would write songs with Shawn Mendes, Camila Cabello, Paul McCartney. I mean, Paul McCartney, it's mind-blowing to think that the guy who's writing songs with John Lennon, like you wrote a song with him, you wrote a song with Dan Smith from Bastille, who's also on the show this season. Let's just take any of those examples, right? When somebody says, I want Ryan Tedder to write the song for me or with me, I imagine it's almost like you kind of have to approach it like a therapist, right? Like you're going in, not a therapist, but somebody, you want to understand what they want to say and what they want to feel. Like, all right, you come into a room, there's no song, and you are with, let's say, Dan Smith of Bastille or Paul McCartney, whoever. Yeah. How do you start that conversation to decide or to figure out what you want to write or what you're going to say or write?
So it's different with everybody. I mean, you hit the nail on the head when you said therapist. You have to be a listener. You have to be empathetic. You have to make sure the artist is heard. I'm a super high energy type A person, so I have to be careful that I don't steamroll whoever's in the room.
Yeah.
Let's use Paul McCartney, for instance. McCartney, I had always wanted to work with him. His manager knew that. He had some time off. They called me. Of course, I jumped at it. I said yes, flew out to his little village in England. And I made the conscious decision before we started, I'm going to, because I've done this, fortunately, thank God, I had pre-gamed with U2. I had already done 2 U2 albums. And I walked into their world on the first one with the album mostly done, but not done. Can you pick the best songs and then doctor up the ones that need doctoring?
As a songwriter or as a producer?
As a producer. So sometimes I have to put on the producer hat, sometimes a songwriter hat. Sometimes they work at the same time. So with Sir Paul, I just decided I'm going to ask him what he's got cooking and comb through, a handful of ideas that he's already started and see if I can improve on what he's already built and kind of show him that, that's like that's empathetic. That's saying like, I'm going to put you first and I want to, whatever your creations are, to show them as much courtesy as humanly possible. And then if I can do that successfully with the first song and you like where it's going, then I maybe will earn the right to start something from scratch with you that represents more what I want to hear from you. That's like playful and fun and whatever. And so we did that on the first day, and it started, he played me a bunch of demos and I picked one song. He had this one lyric and melody that I thought was just super haunting. And I said, are you cool if we mess with this? He said, all right, man, that sounds chill to me. Let's do it. And so I went to work on one record and we spent the whole first day. I think I was there 4 or 5 days. And we spent the whole first day working on that and the second day. And then I said, is it cool if on the last day we just do something from scratch for fun? So on the third day, we did a song that, to be honest, I never thought he'd actually, I doubted if he'd actually keep or use. But it was so irreverent and fun and raucous and ridiculous and catchy that it ended up becoming the first single. I've never been more blown away by any musician in my life. I used him like, it was as if I had 7 musicians in the room. Wow. I used him like a sampler. He plays every instrument like a session player. So he ran around the room and I go, bass, and I might go, can the bass line be a little bit more like this? He goes, oh yeah, man, let's do it. Like, boom. Would you mind playing drums? And that's the only time where he went, do you want me to play drums? I was like, dude, do you know how to play? You have the kit. And I'm like pointing in the back of the room. I go, dude, you have the kit. It's the kit from Sgt. Pepper. It's sitting in the corner of a studio and it still works. I was like, why don't, if you know how to, do you know how to play him? And I said it kind of jokingly. I know he knows how to play drums. He goes, yeah. I'm not, there's better drummers than me. Ringo's could play this better than I could, but and I go, play it. He sits down and crushes it on the drums. Wow. Then he goes over to the Strawberry Fields Mellotron and plays that. Then he plays the harpsichord, and like he played every instrument. I basically used him like a sample pack, just like dropping samples here and there all over the song. And by the end, I threw in a couple drums and we sang background vocals together and a bunch of live claps together. We had this crazy, crazy song.
It's just an amazing breadth of talent that you've worked with. And I know you've said that music and the industry, can change a lot in just a year or two. But you keep songwriting, you keep producing for other people, even though you don't really need to. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, where is music now? Like, what is it like to be a top 40 songwriter now?
When we catch hits now in 2022, it's 10 times harder to have a hit as a songwriter or an artist in 2022 than it was in 2016 or any other time in my career. 75
is that because of TikTok?
TikTok and the DSPs. 75,000 songs a day are uploaded to Spotify. 75,000.
Wow.
TikTok now dictates roughly 95% of all hits. You have to go viral. Yeah. So not only can you write a hit record like About Damn Time. About Damn Time, Lizzo was dead. It debuted at 68, dropped to 150, dropped out of the top 200. My friends wrote that song. I texted him the day it came out. Blake, I think this song's a smash. I wish you well. I hope it smashes. It was dead on arrival. She hosted SNL. She performed it on SNL. One of only 3 artists to ever do that. The song went down the next day on Spotify.
Wow.
iTunes charts don't matter. Sorry, iTunes, but they don't matter. Number one on iTunes is like 4,000 copies.
Wow. But I hear that song all the time.
So let me explain what happened. And this is why it's so hard now to have hits. That song is, to me, from the first listen, a hit record. In 20 years of doing music, my A&R ears go, that's a hit. Enough so that I texted the damn writer and said, it's a hit. She's huge on socials, on Instagram, on TikTok. So I thought, well, she's got socials and the song's a hit. She's good to go. After 10 days of release, she was already teasing the next single. And the songwriters would tell you, if they're being honest, like Blake is, Ryan, we had already moved on. The song wasn't even in the top 200. It was dead. Day 13, 14 after release, some young girl, I don't know who she is, young girl, posts a video in her bedroom dancing, not to the chorus, but to this opening line of the second verse. I'm going to need a sentimental, in a minute, I'm going to need a sentimental man or woman to pump me up. That line. She dances to that line. Within 72 hours, that had gone globally viral on TikTok. The song's playing in the background. You know what happens next. Lizzo then reposts it. Then other celebrities repost it. Then it's on the Today Show. Within 7 days, the song went from it's not even a single, we're moving on, to it's viral on TikTok. It's now one of the biggest smashes in the world. So the point I'm making is that removes any of the years of expertise of all the songwriters in that room. Ricky Reed, Blake Slatkin, all of the expertise, all of the time spent focusing on producing and songwriting literally mitigates it. It throws it out the window and says, no matter how good the song is, you need it to go viral on TikTok. And by the way, it's because of some random girl in her bedroom, not because of any other reason. The blessing of TikTok, the blessing of social media and of the world we live in now, ageism has died.
Look at Kate Bush. Running up the hill.
Elton John, Metallica right now. Elton John, having one of the biggest hits of his career. So that gives me hope. While it's way harder to have hits now, it gives me hope for the future that we can continue to have them. And I do it. And to answer the longest winded version of answering your question, I still do it because I actually do love touring. I got into music as a band to see the world as much as I could while I was alive and to see as many places and play for as many people as I could. And the fact that I get paid to go play songs in front of people on 6 of the continents. To me, that is like the greatest luxury of all time. I will never take it for granted. But the engine behind that is OneRepublic having hit songs and having songs that people love. So that's why I keep doing it, is because I genuinely love when I get text messages from friends going, I'm backpacking in Kathmandu, Nepal, and your new single's on the radio. That is the greatest feeling in the world.
Do you think that, I mean, you've been at this since you were basically a little kid, right? Piano, banging at the keys, listening to music, absorbing that music, studying songwriters, really kind of deconstructing them, trying to figure out what it is that makes a song connect with people, you know, metaphors, visual language. Now we're in a different world, right? It's all that expertise, all that time is different because of the way music is consumed, particularly through TikTok, which, by the way, how does it change the way you think about songwriting now?
You still have to just sit down and write the best song you possibly can. At the end of the day, you have to write the best song you possibly can. But evolution, right? Evolve or die. Evolve or die. Two things that have changed, where TikTok has changed how I approach songwriting. Number one is now I no longer have to pick singles. That's the bane of my existence, is picking the right single for OneRepublic.
Yeah.
I never pick the right one. Now, for instance, after our Top Gun single has run its course, I will play 5 songs, probably in their entirety, or at least a minute, a verse and a chorus, and I will let the world decide what our next single is. And that's what Lil Nas X. I had a huge a global hit with him this summer and the spring. Well, actually, starting back in November, with "That's What I Want." And how did we know that "That's What I Want" was going to be a single? He played it on Valentine's Day. He posted a video of himself wearing angel's wings with the song playing in the background, and it exploded on his TikTok page in terms of likes. And the next day, the head of the label called me and he goes, "That's a smash. That's going to be the next single." So I can use TikTok, millions of people, as our like testing ground, which saves me honestly the heartache, the heartbreak from pushing the wrong song up the hill. That's number one. Number two, if I'm writing a song now, OneRepublic or anybody, I can't help but think, as I'm doing the lyrics specifically, are there any moments in this song lyrically that are really sticky in terms of a TikTok audience or in terms of a younger audience, whether it's a gaming audience or TikTok? So I'm aware of it. I'm not going to sit down and write a song for TikTok. I've never done that. There are a ton of people that do it. I refuse to do it. That's a point of soul destruction that I can't cross. But I will absolutely.
Your money don't jiggle.
My money don't jiggle. But yeah, exactly. But I will absolutely, I will cheat in some lyrics or moments that I think will be sticky for social media.
Ryan, do you think that creativity is something that is only available to the few? I mean, you obviously have been a student of your craft since you were a kid and in high school, and working under mentors like Timberland and really trying to understand how to connect with listeners, talking to Bono about finding that space in your mind. But do you think that's something that anybody can tap into? I mean, obviously there are levels of talent, right? There are people who make a career out of what you do at the highest levels, like you. But do you think creativity is something that is accessible only to some, or do you think that it's something that is available to everybody and can be accessed by everybody?
I think creativity can be accessed by everybody. But let me say this. To be great at anything, you have to be obsessed, in my opinion. You can be good at a lot of things and not be obsessed. To be great at anything, you have to be obsessed. When there is an intersection of natural, let's say, early gifted talent or just revealed talent, when that intersects with a obsessive personality, then high levels of success can be attained in any vertical, creative, accounting, investing, real estate, you name it, right? Cooking. I've spent multiple times hanging out with Thomas Keller. The man's obsessed. He's obsessed. Yeah, he's good. But what is obsession? Why do I say obsessed, and why does that matter? Obsession equals hours put in.
Yeah.
And that really, to me, is everybody talks about 10,000 hours. Sure. I'm like, nope, 20,000 hours. And that's really the writers that work with me now that are 20 years younger than me. I think that if anything, if I leave them any impression, it's this dude still works like he hasn't had a hit and he's 19. What in the world is wrong with him? And I think that's the delineating factor. I think everybody can access creativity and everybody can create. I also think that if anybody goes out on a basketball court and shoots free throws every day for a year, they're going to have a damn good shot and have a high percentage of free throws. But they're not going to be able to play for the Rockets. They're not going to be able to play for the Lakers. And that's I wanted to be a pro basketball player for about 18 months. Yeah. And then I hit 6'1" and stopped. And the day I realized I wasn't growing anymore, I stopped playing. I literally stopped playing basketball. And that time went towards music because I was like, I'm not going to be in the NBA anymore, I guess. You know, it's not in the car. That was at age 14, which is right when I switched into full-time focused on music. Like I said, it's like, if you do anything enough, you can be great at it, but not everybody's 6'7". And hopefully that answers the question.
That's Ryan Tedder. And besides being music's foremost song doctor, Ryan's a pretty smart business guy. He says in the business of music, 2 + 2 = bananas. So it's not surprising he's got a premium real estate portfolio and venture capital investments like stakes in the hemp water company Mad Tasty and the Sweet Green restaurant chain. In fact, Rolling Stone magazine says he's music's, quote, under-the-cover mogul. You can find all the show notes for this episode at our website, thegreatcreators.com/Tedder. Hey, thanks so much for listening to the show this week. If you liked what you heard, we have one simple request. Please tell someone about it. Share a link, a tweet, or post a story and hashtag The Great Creators. You can find us on social media by searching The Great Creators. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and I'm on TikTok as guy.raz. Please spread the word, and thanks. This episode was produced by James Delahousie and edited by Andrea Bruce with help from Jeff Rogers. Thanks also to Kevin Leahy, Elaine Coates, Jenna Gedman, Nat Hoops, Michael May, Michelle Triant, Marita Murphy, and Daniel Shukin. I'm Guy Raz. You've been listening to The Great Creators from Built It Productions.